episode of Just One More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justonemorefix.com or on Twitter at justonemorefix. If you like us, head over to iTunes or to Google Play and give us a rating and a comment. In this episode, we're going to talk about making better Vampire the Masquerade characters. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix. Welcome to Just One More Fix. I have a couple quick, not really announcements, but I guess thank yous to a couple people. So hopefully they'll hear these. But big thank you to the guys that run the Twitter account for Trail of Cthulhu Weekly. They've given us credit for several posts that we've made for sharing some inspiration about Trail of Cthulhu games and some creepy articles and stories that we found that are actually happening currently. I think one of them was sounds coming from the Arctic Ocean floor that they had no idea where they were coming from. What was the other one? There's like 3 or 4 of them.
Not sure.
I don't know. So either go back and check out our Twitter or check their Twitter page. It's Trail of Cthulhu Weekly or our Twitter page, Just One More Fix. So big thanks to them for crediting us for those. And yeah, looking forward to much more creepy awesomeness happening in the world, I suppose, to use for gaming inspiration.
You can count on it.
Right. On the other one is a big thank you to Ken Hyde. He retweeted our Trail of Cthulhu review. Obviously, it was very positive. We like that game a lot, but a big thanks to him for helping spread our word a little bit. And the last one is to Mark Plemons over at Brabble Mark, and they produced Apocalypse World event, I guess you could call it, is what I think it's listed as called They Came From Hollywood, kind of using our idea from our MASH review and our game that I ran with having a Hollywood starlet show up to the MASH unit, and drama and trouble ensues. And he gave us inspiration credit at the bottom of that one. So big thanks to him. And you guys should really check it out. If you haven't listened to our review, check it out for MASH. It's a great game. It's a lot different than a lot of other RPGs and way different than any of the other Powered by the Apocalypse games. So if you're not a big fan of Powered by the Apocalypse stuff or Apocalypse World, it's way different. Check it out. And it does a lot of different things that a lot of the other RPGs don't. So I don't want to go on too much about it, but you can check out our review. And I think that'll do it. So if you guys haven't heard on several episodes ago, I believe it was episode 45, we talked about building better vampire games because there's a lot of people that want to get into Vampire the Masquerade, but they feel kind of intimidated by the amount of stuff that's there. So we built a city with some basic framework for politics and that kind of stuff with city officials. So if you haven't listened to that one, you may want to go back and check that out. It's episode 45, and we'll link it in the show notes below. But we're going to make a couple, essentially not quite neonates, but not really ancilla or elders either, somewhere in between there. I guess an experienced neonate, you might say, to go into this game and kind of lay out how it is that we go about making vampire characters. So
let's do it.
All right, I guess we're just going to jump right into this. So you might hear some screeching of pencils as we fill in dots, like ACT style on these vampire character sheets. Right, exactly.
Our number 2 pencils.
Yeah. And we also have these characters are being made out of the Vampire 20, the V20 book, the tome that is Vampire 20. But they are both going to be Camarilla vampires, so that's the first stipulation.
Or are they?
Well, you know.
Oh, okay. Yes, they are.
So that's the first stipulation on this, is that they will be Camarilla vampires. So I guess we'll just jump right in here. So if you're not familiar with character concept is the first step. That's step 1.
You'll notice when you're designing your character that concept actually becomes before clan. I feel like that's an important thing to note.
Yes, because that's one thing is, even though it's a Vampire the Masquerade game, I always try to think of, I'm making a character, not a vampire. Because if you think of other big vampire shows and characters that you know and love, like Lestat or Louis in Interview with a Vampire, or several of the different characters from True Blood, while they were vampires, that's not what they were as a character, right?
Right.
And that's what makes them compelling. Not the fact that they're a vampire and that they suck blood from people. That's part of it, but
their interactions with other individuals, vampires in the world around them is what makes them compelling.
Exactly. Okay, so do you want to start or do you want me to go?
I'm still mulling things over. So why don't you go ahead and start us off?
So hopefully, I guess we should just say that we haven't really thought about anything of this beforehand. We're sitting here and doing this, well, I guess live for me and you, but, without any real prep. So if these characters suck, I guess we'll
they'll be eliminated naturally.
Exactly. There you go. So my concept was I thought about making I'm going to kind of jump around with some terms here, but there's a concept among the Nosferatu clan of a group of Nosferatu that are called Cleopatras. And generally they are people that were good looking in life. So they were handsome or beautiful. So they're striking, and they get embraced either out of spite or all different kinds of reasons. Right. So I was envisioning someone who is a charismatic, handsome, likely businessman of some kind, and that was successful because of his charisma and his ability to put people at ease when he's speaking to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so that's my basic concept there. I did kind of lay out clan in there, but it's tightly tied into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the concept that I just came up with right now, I think I'm going to do, not I think, I'm definitely, I am going to do a character who was kind of a behind the scenes agent for the old school casinos of Las Vegas.
Oh, right on.
So kind of like the number cruncher in the background.
Cool. So like organized crime style?
Organized crime, but like clean background, above the board appearance, organized crime.
Okay. So you're the face.
So like LinkedIn, but
right, you're the person that the mob keeps legit,
like the mob lawyer sort of
right.
thing, but more like the mob accountant.
Right. Yeah. The person that has to stay legit so they can stay in business.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Right on. First off, we mentioned concept here, so then kind of tied right into that is clan nature and demeanor, and these all kind of come together at the same time in a lot of ways. But I guess what I was trying to mention first is that while they come together at the same time, the defining piece of your character shouldn't be the clan. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and sometimes you will get a more interesting character by kind of shattering the stereotypes that people are expecting. So maybe I'm playing a beautiful artist character, and instead of being a Toreador, maybe I'm turned into a Nosferatu. And then you have your Cleopatra thing, or maybe I'm turned into a Malkavian and now I'm like beautiful and crazy, or maybe I'm a Bruja. Yeah. And, you have this slender being who has this untold amount of power behind it that you're not expecting.
Right on. All right. So the next step is nature and demeanor. Now, I'm not a big fan of demeanor, and this is just a personal choice of mine. Nature is your true self, right? And demeanor is how people perceive you. Now, the reason I don't like demeanor is because I think when you're among different groups of people, you act differently and you're a different person to different groups of people. And in the past, demeanor didn't have any real mechanical function in terms of the game. So it wasn't a big deal in my mind to just sort of not enforce it or not worry about it so much. Also, I'm moody, so my demeanor changes on a whim, just depending on how things go. And just to go reiterate the initial point is that I'm a vastly different person in my professional life than I am in my private life. I don't know, or who I am around my friends, essentially. So that's why I've never been a big fan of demeanor. Now, if you guys want to incorporate it, right on, do whatever works for your table best. But it's just
like, I would argue on the behalf of demeanor just to say that I think probably when you're talking about the majority of social interaction, it's going to be happening at Elysium or in the presence of city officials. And so then the demeanor is what you're projecting in front of your social elite
like in
peers.
Vampire Society. Oh, that's fair.
Right. That's
a fair point. If you want to make that caveat on, I think that's a fair point. That's really cool. I can't believe I haven't thought of that in the past, really. Did you just come up with that now? Like, for real?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, we may incorporate that. There you go. All right. So my nature, I'm going to do competitor. So like I said, I'm kind of going with this high wealth deal maker, that not quite sleazy car salesman style, but the guy you can't say no to. Everybody knows those people that can sell, what is it? Ketchup popsicles to a lady in a red dress on a summer day or whatever it is, that kind of a thing. You ever heard that before?
No.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you just made that up right now.
Just like your nature, your demeanor thing. There we go. Right on.
Ketchup popsicles. What?
To a lady in a red dress, maybe cherry popsicle.
That is disgusting.
Look, I had one good idea with the event thing for MASH, and now I'm done. I'm out. I'm spent. That's all I got. So, all right. So I guess going along, are you going to pick a nature?
Yes. So my nature is going to be director. So you oversee what must be done. So in that, there is an inherent sort of black and white logic. This is what it is because that's what it has to be, and morals be damned sort of feel to it.
Right. You know what? I may change things up a little bit. So I think so. I'm going to change things up a little bit. I feel like people would expect this guy, given his history, that he would be a competitor, and going off of your theory that it should be who you are in front of vampire society, that's going to be my demeanor. But clearly he lost a big piece of him when he got embraced and becomes disfigured like a Nosferatu. So I think that's going to make him turn kind of dark and sort of fracture his soul in a lot of ways, right? So I'm thinking I may go with...
You should go with curmudgeon because it's the funnest word to say on the
list. A curmudgeon?
Curmudgeon.
I was thinking just straight up monster.
That sounds good. And my demeanor is going to be a conformist.
Oh, nice. Got to go along. So in my mind, I'm thinking, now that I change this to monster, I'm thinking someone who looks like they have it together on the surface and wants to compete in the social hierarchy of things and wants to get ahead in the game that is being a vampire, but deep down is just sort of a broken person because they lost so much of who they were and how they identified with themselves, and now just wants to see the world burn in a lot of ways and wants to inflict the pain that they have felt in what was taken away from them on other people and make them all suffer. So
that sounds cheery.
Right on, yeah. Well, it's a dark game. I like, so may as well bring the darkness, right? It is a world of darkness, as they say. All right. So after that piece, we've got nature, clan, demeanor, and concept down. The next piece would be starting to spend our attribute points, which is, if you're not familiar, Vampire breaks things up into 3 categories for their attributes: is physical, social, and mental. So you get 1 dot in each of the 3 statistics to start off with for free, and then you get to spend 753. So because I'm a Nosferatu, I automatically mark out appearance because Nosferatu have 0 appearance.
Because you ugly.
I'm disfigured, like terribly.
I didn't choose my clan yet.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
I am going to be Clan Tremere.
Oh.
Now, I considered being Brujah because if you look back to our city, they have tie-ins with organized crime. But I think it is going to be more interesting to be Tremere and kind of butting up against that. Plus, isn't there some tension somewhere with the Tremere happening? No, I guess the Brujah is the scourge, isn't it? So they're kind of on the outskirts of things.
Well, there was tension between the Tremere and the Brujah, or the Tremere and the Nosferatu, because they had ties with the police and were able to get access to information quicker.
Yeah, information.
Nosferatu could.
Right. Anyway, I stick with my original first statement, though, in that Brujah have a lot of influence with the organized crime.
Right, correct.
In our little world, and I think that will make for interesting conversations.
Right. I also chose Nosferatu in this kind of concept because of the tension, or not the tension. The Nosferatu sheriff and the Toreador seneschal, they are allies together. So whether my sire maybe embraced me to create problems between the 2 clans because maybe there's some disagreements inside the clan about how to do things, or someone wants to rise to the top faster, that's why I was embraced to basically throw a wrench into things. So right on. So, okay. So now we're going to start spending some points and filling in some dots. Now, I will say, I don't believe that there's anything wrong with looking and taking into consideration what your disciplines use to roll, because you don't want to make a character that's ineffective, right?
Right.
But I also don't think that you want to use that to only dictate what you buy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think you have to find that happy medium somewhere, because you want to be effective in game, but you still want to be true to the character you're trying to build, right? Okay, so let's start spending some dots here. So I'm going to buy... It's going to be a long pause. It's deleted out of here, so this is going to be a good time.
Now, just to give a frame of reference, 2 would be like an average rating in a skill. Is that?
In a skill or an attribute?
In an attribute, sorry.
I believe it's 3, or 2 is average. I mean, 3 would be good, 4 is exceptional, and then 5 is like Olympic athlete or Neil deGrasse Tyson, or...
I'm the Neil deGrasse Tyson of gymnastics.
There you go.
Wait, what?
That's kind of a mixed metaphor. That goes back to my ketchup popsicle thing there, I think. All right, so in my case, for my number 1 that got 7 dots, I chose mental. So I don't want to spend a ton of time going through what dots you spend where, but I am a mental, social, physical character, which if you don't know, if Nosferatu get potents as an in-clan, I think it's fun sometimes to have characters that have weaknesses in areas that are normally strengths for that clan. It creates some interesting potential for role-playing where you can pretend to boast a little bit that I'm this strong machine of death when in fact I'm not. So you can kind of play off of people's expectations that way and then see what you can get away with, which is always fun to do, you know? Right on. So what did you choose there?
So I also went mental, social, physical last because I'm basically a boogie nerd. I mean,
Right.
you could take some physical, but that's not how I'm leaning. I have basically very unbalanced attributes. So I chose to be very good at manipulation and very good at intelligence.
Okay.
And everything else is just kind of average.
Fair enough. I guess it does bear mentioning Nosferatu have a 0 appearance. So normally I might put the 7 in social with this kind of a character, but
Just to make it terribly unbalanced.
well, yeah, but like at the same time, it kind
I
of
have
goes,
a 4 and a 5.
yeah, it goes a little wonky. So I don't know. I would probably spend some freebie points there to boost things up to where I would like them to be. But, you know, all right. So the next thing you do is you're going to buy abilities, which are again broken up into 3 categories, which are talents, skills, and knowledges. And in this case, you get 1395 dots to spend. So these are the things, whenever you do something in World of Darkness, generally you're going to roll an attribute plus an ability. So you might roll manipulation plus subterfuge, or strength plus brawl, or intelligence plus investigation, something, you know, along those lines. So I guess go ahead and spend wildly. Also, it bears mentioning that none of these can be higher than 3 when you start. Without, you can raise them higher by spending freebie points, but they can't start higher than 3. All righty.
Boy, you're fast.
I've done this a few times. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, I've mentioned it in the past several times that I've ran World of Darkness games for a long time, but I've also ran Mind's Eye Theater games, which is the Vampire the Masquerade version of a LARP, essentially. And I've made a lot of characters, made a lot of NPCs. I've helped people build a lot of characters, so I'm very good at filling out dots.
Okay.
So do you just want to hit the highlights of what you bought there and maybe why?
Okay. So I did a general spread across talents. I hit some of the empathy, expression, and intimidation because they're all very useful in social interactions. And some of them also come up later on when you're discussing the dominate ability.
Right.
Also, alertness and awareness are life-saving talents to have, even if you only have a couple of points in them. So just to kind of highlight the difference, alertness is being aware of what's going on like in the physical world around you. Awareness is more like your ability to notice a power or
Right.
some sort of magic, basically.
Bad juju. Right.
That is happening, whether or not it's impacting you, but just in your general area. And the bulk of my points I spent there in subterfuge, because if you're working for the mob and organized crime, you probably ought to be able to lie.
Right. Especially to law enforcement.
Yeah, or, at least bend the truth.
Right. Right.
I did not put any in Streetwise. I kind of would like to have at least one there, given just the mafia ties. I don't think it's essential, but I might go back and spend one of my freebie points there.
Right.
As far as skills go, I took a little bit of stealth because it's always a good thing to have. A little bit of melee as well, because I feel like once you've been a vampire for so long, you probably have had to do at least a little bit of fisticuffs and armed combat at some point along the road, especially if you started out in the casino world during the heyday of bad breaking these times.
Right.
Etiquette, as a social character with any kind of social prowess and hopes to get anywhere within the vampire community, you should probably have a dot of etiquette.
Right.
That is going to be like your, I didn't realize that. I would never say that.
Right.
I have a basic knowledge of what's going on here.
Customs?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then firearms. And then for my knowledges, I took a spread of more political, financial, and law leaning things. So my highest one is actually in finance. And then I've got a pretty good balance in politics, law, academics, and investigation.
Okay, right on. All right, so the way I spent mine would be talents, skills, and knowledges in that order. So knowledges have only got 5 points. Now I took a kind of a broad spread of these things. So like academics, finance, investigation, law, and politics. And that's because being a deal maker, like maybe I don't envision this guy having maybe the best ability to
He doesn't know all the subtle nuances of the system, but
exactly
enough to avoid the major pitfalls.
Right. But he makes his money, and really his bread and butter is the sell. So if he has people around him that can give him the information, he knows that sounds like it's crap, or that sounds like it's good, but I can sell and work with that. That's kind of the thing that I'm envisioning here, right? So he's not the best at the creating the ideas, but he's more of the developer and the guy that can pitch them and sell them, if that makes sense. So followed by that, I have skills. So I took 3 dots in stealth because having this vision of this guy feeling like I'm a monster. So when he initially gets embraced and becomes a Nosferatu, I'm thinking that he's going to kind of develop his obfuscate abilities because he's so kind of just destroyed by this process that he doesn't want to show his face to anybody, kind of wants to lurk in the shadows and hide from everyone, which is kind of where the stealth is going to come from. It's probably something that I would vision developing after you get embraced as opposed to in his mortal life. And then animalkin, kind of lurking in the sewers. Again, that kind of ties into the discipline I'm going to have later on with animalism.
Animalkin can be an interesting ability.
Yeah. And I just living in the sewers and in this muck and in the alleys and in the dark areas where no one wants to go. There's no one there but rats and raccoons and stray dogs and that kind of stuff. So just sort of kind of developing that as an ability, I guess, after the embrace.
The system does pick up on some of the classical vampire tropes. So in general, animals are going to be very wary of you because you have the beast. Yeah. So they are not going to be approaching you normally. And so this ability kind of gives you an interesting advantage in that aspect.
Right. And then as well, I took a little bit of survival, being able to find places to hide and knowing where to be able to bed down in a safe place when daylight comes. After that, I took some alertness, or like I said, in the talents column, I've got a lot of intimidation, a lot of subterfuge, learning how to make those deals, how to bluff, how to get the deal made.
Subterfuge is probably my favorite talent. Like, I don't think I've ever made a character that didn't have at least one in subterfuge.
Just a good idea. Vampires are liars, right? If you don't need to lie, you need to know who is lying, which might be the more important skill to have. Along with that, I took some leadership. I feel like this is a social guy, kind of a natural leader, and a dot and brawl because maybe through and a couple dots of athletics, fitness, putting on that good face, being fit, maybe a boxing class here and there, but nothing too serious, right?
I think most of those physical talents and abilities make a lot of sense for especially vampire characters because you're talking about probably at least 20 to 50 years of mortal life stacked on top of another 50 years. It's kind of unreasonable to think that you've never ever been punched in the face in 100 years of life. Can you not punch your
way out of a wet paper bag?
Unlife.
Right, yeah, exactly. So like I said, well, in this case, we're making these characters. These are things that we've chosen to buy, part of them because of our mortal lives, and also part of them because of things that happen after the embrace. So you don't have to make it just as a straight character, only a human. Now I apply this vampire thought process to it. You can do that kind of at the same time, which is what we have really done here.
There's, just to mention it really quick, some differences in how this game does abilities than I would say like a Dungeons and Dragons game does. So for like Drive is a good example.
Yeah.
So this is the modern age. It's not really reasonable to think, maybe if you were playing an elder vampire, you wouldn't be able to drive a car. But anybody who's been embraced since automobiles were everywhere, like the 70s, should be able to drive a vehicle without having to make a test. So this is for more complex issues. And if you're playing a super modern game with like, maybe you're playing Mortals in World of Darkness, or maybe you're playing brand new out the gate vampires, then I think the same applies to computers.
I agree.
Like you can operate a cell phone, you can operate the laptop. Right. Yeah. You can get on Google, but maybe you're not going to be hacking into anything without some computer skill.
Correct. The other thing is my general rule with Drive has always been you can drive an automatic without any points in it. But if you want to drive a stick shift with any proficiency, that's going to be 1 dot. If you want to be able to ride a motorcycle, that's 1 dot. And that's not doesn't have to be a ton, right? Now you're not going to be Evel Knievel on the motorcycle, but you can at least keep it upright and ride like a competent rider.
With 1 dot.
Yeah. Now you may not want to be getting in any stressful car chases on the motorcycle. That might be bad for you because you're going to be limited on your dice pool, obviously, but it at least gives you the ability to say, I ride a motorcycle or whatever. And along the same thing with computers, it seems unreasonable to say that you can't work a Google search without having a dot. That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Now, in this, in the V20 system, do you get specialties for free?
No, you do not.
Okay, so I think maybe just talk about specialties really briefly while we're here touching on abilities?
So if you have 3 dots in something, in a skill, or I should say an ability, not in specifically the category skills, but when you have 3 dots in an ability, it gives you the opportunity to buy a specialty, and you can have 1 specialty at 3, 2 specialties at 4, and 1 specialty at 5. And it lowers the difficulty of anything that you do involving that specialty by 1, which when your target number is only a 6, normally is a pretty huge step in what you can do. So it would lower the difficulty to a 5. So it's a pretty big deal. Now, initially, you don't start with any specialties in this. Now, in the Requiem version, you do pick specialties, but that's just a whole different thing. So
specialties are cool as well, aside from just the mechanical effect, in that they help flesh out. Yeah, they give your character some quirks.
Right. So maybe I may not be the best. I don't know. Well, computer would be a good example, maybe. I may not be the best computer person. I've only got 3 dots in it, but I'm a heck of a programmer. So I take computer programming, or maybe I take hacking or something like that. Like I may not be the Steve Jobs of computers, but I'm a good hacker, so I have a specialty in it. Yeah.
I've got 5 in drive, but race cars makes me Dale Earnhardt, whereas motorcycles makes me Steve McQueen.
Exactly. There's an awesome story about Steve McQueen that I'm dying to tell involving the Great Escape, but that's a whole nother thing. He's a bad dude on a motorcycle. That's the bottom line. Okay, so next is discipline. So you get 3 dots in disciplines to spend. Now, each clan has 3 in-clan disciplines. So the Tremere's is a little more complicated, but I think we may just put the parameter on it that...
I'm just going to gloss right over the whole thaumaturgy thing as far as rituals and that.
Okay, rituals.
We can touch on it, but I don't think we need to delve into the inner workings of Clan Tremere necessarily.
Okay. So initially, all Clan Tremere, they say, unless you have a special reason why you wouldn't have it, which it doesn't make sense that you wouldn't have blood to start off with. It is the most versatile and useful, but generally Tremere start with the Path of Blood, Auspex, and Dominate, and then they can buy more thaumaturgy as they go along and get access to secret rituals and books and stuff. As a Nosferatu, my character is going to get Animalism, Potence, and Obfuscate. So Obfuscate is the ability to hide or appear as someone else. Potence is physical strength, and Animalism is control over animals. So being that I'm not going to be a super old vampire here, I'm going to spend all 3 of my dots in Obfuscate, being the idea before that I mentioned that my guy here, he just was shattered by his embrace and spent a ton of time just lurking in the shadows and hiding. And that's really his go-to of the vampire powers that he has access to, and sort of his go-to method for things, that if things get too stressful and he can't deal with it, he just disappears and goes and hides and sulks off somewhere and plots revenge in a terrible, terrible way. Along the same way, it would be, I guess, his go-to for his method of feeding, the stealthy ambush from a dark alley, maybe feeding on homeless or, addicts and that kind of stuff.
So Clan Tremere is going to start with Auspex, Dominate, and Thaumaturgy as their in-class disciplines. And you talked earlier about Clan Nosferatu having the 0 appearance thing. So for Clan Tremere, there's something called a blood bond, which is when you drink another vampire's blood, you become bound to them. There's a strong emotional attachment that you can fight it, but it costs significant. Well, basically, for all intents and purposes right now, we're going to say you can't really resist it.
Yeah.
And it is easier for them to be bounded to another vampire.
Normally it takes 3 steps to be fully blood bound. And for Tremere, when they have the first drink, it counts as the second drink, essentially, is the way it works. So if you're not familiar with it, if you think of maybe True Blood in that, when they can kind of feel each other's emotions and have like dreams of them, and when they know when something's wrong or when they've died, it's like that. But I would think the way they describe it in the book is it seems like it's more intense than that. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. So what are you going to spend your disciplines on there?
I get 3
points. Yeah, to start off with.
Well, I like Dominate because I feel like I'm someone who is, 1, used to getting their way, and 2, probably used to having to order around a fair amount of lackeys in order to get things done. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put 2 in Dominate and 1 in Auspex, because a 1 in Auspex will let you see someone's aura, which can tell you a good deal. And
that's 2.
What's 1? Oh, heightened senses. Yeah. Okay. Well, heightened senses then.
You're working towards that.
Good for eavesdropping and whatnot.
Right. All right. So next is backgrounds. And this is the meat and potatoes of what happens in Vampire in my mind. This is the things that are not inside of you that you have access to. So friends that you have, allies.
These are the strings you can pull to manipulate the puppet show.
Exactly. So this is, well, probably the most, I don't know. It's like it's very important in game, but a lot of times it happens kind of behind the scenes stuff. It's not things that you physically do generally, but it's a very large part of the genre. There's this assumption that vampires are swinging all this influence around over the mortal world and that kind of stuff, and that's where a lot of this is contained. Alrighty, so now we're going to spend 5 dots. Now, I will say, generally, I write down a lot more backgrounds than I'm actually going to buy initially because I come back and spend freebie points on them because they are cheap with freebie points. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick.
Are we breaking down types of influence?
Yeah, if you just want to do like a broad category.
We get 7.
5.
Ah, nuts.
But you get freebie points, so you know what I'm saying.
We'll come back to this.
Yeah. All right, so are you going to spend quite a bit of your freebie points on this?
I always spend the bulk of my freebie points on backgrounds.
So why don't we put this section of backgrounds on hold? We'll come back to it after we spent freebie points because my plan is to spend quite a bit there too, so that we don't have to kind of come back and revisit where we put our points and why. So the next thing after that is virtues. Now, virtues, because we're both Camarilla, we're both going to be on the path of humanity, which means we have conscience, self-control, and courage. And you get 7 points to spend here, and you get 1 dot in each one for free. Now, each of these things have to do with dealing with your vampire nature. So courage helps you not enter fear frenzy when the sunlight comes out, when you take too much damage, when certain vampire powers are used on you that cause a fear frenzy. Self-control is controlling the beast inside you. So when you're hungry or when you're angry, controlling that. And then conscious is what helps you hold on to your humanity. So I spent mine and I am courage, self-control, then conscience from highest to lowest. So low conscience because, like I said, I am a monster. I've envisioned that I've probably lost some of that as time has gone by, just doing terrible things to people that I feed off of, maybe former friends that I have that I'm just jealous because they still have what I lost. So maybe I've murdered or fed off of some of them in terrible ways. And self-control, well, you have to spend the points somewhere. So, I mean, that is one of the drawbacks to some of this. So I always do encourage everybody to spend their points. But I'm going to have 3 dots in self-control and 5 dots in courage. So I've got some self-control, but nothing too significant. But I think I see my courage, not necessarily because this guy is brave, but more because I think he's reckless in a way. With this monster, he just devil-may-care kind of attitude about things.
Okay. So mine goes self-control, then conscience, and then courage. I picture myself being a very well-groomed, meticulous, even keel person, not somebody that it's easy to get a rise out of, very, very controlled. Conscience, I made a little lower, so my conscience is a 3. I figure in, given, again, the mortal background and just what goes along with being part of the Tremere Chantry, probably not holding the moral high ground as much as some others might have been, even from the get-go as a mortal.
Right.
And also that goes back to my nature of being a director as well, kind of doing whatever it takes, regardless of what the consequences are. And then my courage is a 2 because I am not courageous.
Right.
I am here to see the light of another day. Let the bold be bold. That is not me.
Right. Right on. Didn't see that one coming. All right. So now those statistics directly correlate to your humanity and willpower. So your courage is going to be equal to your willpower, and your humanity is equal to your conscience plus your self-control. So those are just kind of derived from the other ones. Now, this is essentially the end of character creation, and you get to spend 15 freebie points. And you can divvy those up anywhere you want in your character sheets, and they spend a little differently depending on where you're going to spend them. It's pretty easy to do, so it's spelled out in the rule book.
Another real quick aside.
All right, so now we're going to spend our freebie points real quick. Let's see.
3 hours later.
Alrighty, you all set?
I am all set.
All right, so you can go ahead and go first. Tell me where you spent your freebies at.
Okay, so I did go back and put one little lonely dot in Streetwise. I cranked up my willpower because based on my courage, it was only a 2.
Yeah.
That is a low willpower. That's like a even a below average mortal, right? Don't they usually have two or three?
Yeah, 2 or 3 would be the average.
And dominate is going to pull off of willpower to a certain degree as well.
Well, it sets the difficulty for a person to dominate you as well.
Right.
So that would mean that anyone that wants to dominate you, their difficulty on the dice is a 2, which means
you're getting dominated.
Everything that's not an automatic failure on the die, because in World of Darkness, ones are failures essentially. So
thaumaturgy, some of the disciplines also will pull off of willpower. Just in general, I picture myself not being a weak-willed individual.
Mm-hmm.
So I went from a 2 to a 6 in that.
Oh, wow. Right on.
And the rest I spent on backgrounds. So do you want to...
Just go ahead and lay them out.
Okay. Yeah. So I started off with my 1 city status. Well, I actually might have counted that in my total, now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, hold on. I'm going to add one more dot and something. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Done.
Oh, actually, wait. Hold on. I'm going to put that somewhere else. I need a bigger box for backgrounds. That's my only complaint about this character sheet every time we do it. So I'm going to take 1 in resources because it's always handy to have at least 1 in resources so that at any point in the game you're not destitute if you can't manage to phone a friend.
Right.
So I've got my 1 city status. I also went ahead and took 1 in clan status. I feel like I'm probably a valuable member of Clan Tremere.
Of course you are.
Right.
Why wouldn't you?
The most valuable member of Clan Tremere.
Absolutely.
I'm going places. I have 2 in contacts and 2 in allies. I see myself as being fairly well connected. And the rest of mine is spent in influence, which I spread 3 dots in bureaucracy, 2 in police, 2 in politics, and 1 in media.
Alrighty, so who is your allies? Because you're supposed to declare who your ally is there. So do you have not necessarily like a specific person, but what would your would you want your ally to be there for?
Okay, I am going to have 1 mafia ally for sure. Just given the mortal background, I'm going to say that is somebody that I carried over from that life. And probably my second ally is going to be someone in the government. I haven't given that a whole lot of thought yet. Not like the mayor or anything like that, but maybe the alderman for Tremere's district, possibly.
Okay. So I spent most of mine on backgrounds as well, but I did buy that 5th dot of manipulation. I just feel like this guy is like the master manipulator because I spent 5 points for that 5th dot. And then I spent the rest of them on backgrounds. So I bought contacts because that's always helpful and handy to have. Being kind of a businessman, it would make sense to just know how to get that information out of people and have sources to go to. I have 4 dots in resources. Now, I kind of envisioned this as originally having 5, but in the process of being a vampire, probably let a lot of that wealth atrophy. Investments didn't go well, money didn't get moved around, whatever it is that people do to make that happen, didn't happen. And so some of my wealth that I had has since then decreased, and this is what I'm kind of envisioning. And then I bought some influence in high society and bureaucracy. So bureaucracy being that I know the right levers in the city to pull to get the right things done, permit-wise, liquor licenses, gambling licenses, all these different things that have to happen to make a deal go through, right? That's how I know how to do things. And also high society. These are the people that I deal with that this character is using to, 1, get money raised to invest, 2, to make things happen when the bureaucracy thing kind of falls down and fails. And it puts you in contact with the right kind of people to make anything happen if you're in touch with like the wealthy and influential, essentially. And my last one I bought was allies, and I put, looks like 3 dots there. And this is some guy that I'm envisioning that does things that I can't, that are illegitimate, right? So this guy won't make this deal. I need somebody roughed up. I know this guy will keep his mouth shut for me. And this guy might even fall into a retainer. It might be better to make him a ghoul, but kind of being the monster and not wanting to put that curse onto somebody else. That's like the last shred of humanity that remains. Maybe not making him a ghoul, back and forth. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So, and that's essentially where I spent my points.
You're envisioning yours as a single ally, which means he is going to be pretty substantial and really able to get things done. Whereas I broke mine up into single dot allies, so not as influential.
Right. So the last piece of this, I guess, is kind of a character questionnaire that I actually didn't see appear in the V20 book, but is in the other vampire books that just kind of will go back and forth. So do you envision him having any mortal family left or anything like that?
No.
No? Okay. Mine either. embraced far enough back to where if he did have mortal family, that they're distant enough away now that it's not really relevant to him, especially in kind of the broken person. But the mortal family thing can be kind of interesting because if you still have a mortal family that you kind of watch over, in a way, and like this creepy guardian angel of evil death, whatever you want to call that,
sort of like the Crow.
Yeah, kind of a weird way, but even darker though, because the Crow, well, he did terrible things. He only did them to terrible people. Vampires do terrible things, well, to everybody. So, it's an interesting thing to explore. Some cool potential there. So, how does your character view himself as or is it him or her? I guess you never really said. Her. So how does she view herself as being a vampire? Like, how does she deal with the vampire condition or whatever?
It makes me better at the job I was already doing.
Right on. Vampire power.
I was born for this.
Cool. Right on. I already kind of
was an easy transition.
Now I just make people do what I want. All right, so I already kind of mentioned how this Nosferatu envisions himself being this monster and how he views being a vampire, just at least being a Nosferatu is just a terrible curse, and maybe even more reinforced by dealing with vampire society in that realizing, well, none of you guys look like me. What the heck is the problem here? This is just how unfair the world of darkness is. So. We already mentioned Camarilla, but like, how do you envision your character being involved in politics of the city or wanting to climb the social ladder of Camarilla?
I don't really picture my character being overtly involved in the city politics. And that's why I took conformist as my demeanor. Mm-hmm. So in the social circle, it's going to look like I am not as powerful and kind of bowing to whoever Primogen of Clan Tremere is, or the keeper, or whoever is in charge of social gatherings at that point. I will just be kind of the yes man for that person and not very much trying to do obvious political maneuvering.
Okay. So that's in front of everyone. Is it the same behind closed doors or no?
I picture behind closed doors being able to kind of help people out with favors, but wanting that, maybe more like a boon currency or something like that, as opposed to actual social status.
Okay. Instead of climbing the ladder, you want things for yourself.
Right.
Okay. Right on. As far as my Nosferatu's view of the Camarilla here, I'm not sure that he has one. Not that he wants to be disloyal or anything, but I'm not sure that, I don't know that he quite fits into it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, obviously the Masquerade, and he doesn't want to die, or he'd have probably killed himself by now, but just still struggling to kind of find his place, right? Is kind of what I'm envisioning, and that may get explored through gameplay, and he may end up buying into the Camarilla thing wholeheartedly and being like, this is the new deal that I need to make, and this is where I'm going to use my skills. Or he may just go completely off the rails and be, I'm a monster and I'm just don't care about anybody and I'm going to cause trouble and whatever wherever I go. How about your sire? How do you have any relationship with your sire? Is that good? Is that bad?
I think in most cases, if you're in Clan Tremere, you have some kind of relationship with your sire. Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot of, embracing without permission happening there. It's a pretty structured system, which is different than some of the other clans. It's almost, I don't know, how would you describe it? It's
kind of recruited in a way.
Yeah. Well, and Clan Tremere in general is more regimented than a lot of other clans. It is a very rigid structure.
Right.
So I would say that my sire is, you've already said you've been kind of recruited. So I picture myself as being recruited and kind of groomed for
vetted.
Yeah. And vetted. And I picture my mentor, my whatever sire being kind of, this is my child. And
hooty-doo.
He's a Harvard grad and he joined the same fraternity I did, that kind of thing.
Right. Right on.
I don't know what the word for that is, but
where did you matriculate? Right. As far as my guy here, not a good relationship with his sire, so to speak. And I'm even envisioning like a revenge plot in the future of, I'm going to, murder you and, kind of punish you for what you've done to me and taken away from me.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. For a minute, I thought you meant like a revenge plot, like your sire was going to try and murder you.
Oh, no.
You're such a disappointment.
That's in the future when my plot goes terribly wrong because I'm not experienced enough of a vampire and he sees it coming 2 miles away and then, puts one over on me. So that's kind of where I see him going. Like, I don't want anything to do with my sire. I hate him. I'm angry at him. And in my mind, to increase the drama, I think I would make sure that my sire was in this city here. And maybe even I don't think I'd want him to be the sheriff, because I don't think that makes sense, because the Toreador Seneschal and the sheriff are allies, but maybe to be the Primogen, or maybe the whip, which would be the number 2 in charge person in the clan, somebody of some influence in the city to make things more complicated, so that if I do kill him, it's a big deal, right? So that I set the game up for as much potential for drama and trouble as I can. But that's definitely something that's on the radar of coming in the future. Goals, I guess I'll go first. I already kind of mentioned that. It would be to plot against my sire and bring him down, whether that's would like it to be have the death stroke done, personally, but if I can set things up to where it happens, then that's okay. And then maybe as a second goal, to find my place. Where does this guy fit into the Camarilla society? Does he fit in or not? And kind of puzzle that out and see where that leads the game, I guess.
So goals for my character are to accrue more power and influence, but without being very obvious with it. Mm-hmm. So I kind of have this side scheme where the Harpy is a Tremere, and I don't want that position, but I am fairly influential in fields that are helpful in kind of getting things done on a city level. So I think maybe I could set something up with the Harpy to be like, okay, maybe you want people to come to you to get these things done. Maybe they're offering you boons. Maybe you kick some of that back to me, and we kind of work out a little hustle where I'm actually the one getting things done, and we're both benefiting from that relationship.
Right. Okay, right on. Are there any other, because I don't have that questionnaire sitting right in front of me, but are there any?
I forgot the obvious Clan Tremere goal, to murder the person directly above me in advance rank.
Don't ever forget. Right on.
But not do that.
Right,
all,
of course.
Officially.
Yeah. Because remember, it's not against the Tremere Code if you don't get caught. So are there any other, you kind of mentioned what you want to do in the city, and I don't know that my Nosferatu has any aspirations for rulership in the city, but that could be something that easily develops through gameplay, and that may depend on how the game goes, what the storyteller has in mind, and also the people at the table around us. Because if the other characters of the game are very pro-Camarilla and want to draw people in, that might change where this character goes in significant ways. So kind of made it with an open mind that it could go horribly off the rails, or it could, develop into somebody who buys into everything. Because at some point, this guy was bought into this whole business thing, and that was a big part of him. There's a lot of potential there.
So is there any chance of your character getting sucked into some kind of nonsense anarchy conspiracy based on his urge for destruction?
Maybe just from the sheer destruction point of it, but I don't know. Like, there's nothing in anything that I've laid out here that would be like, I want to be part of a movement that is going to do this. I think it's more rage and not necessarily thought out. Maybe it's like just in bursts, like I'm overcome by what I've lost. I'm going to go destroy something. Okay. Maybe it would if he was embraced by a person who was really influential in the city. I could see it going that way. Like, because if you're an important mover and shaker in this society and in the city, then I'm like, I'm going to burn this mother down, kind of a thing.
Right.
And then maybe, but in this case, no, I don't think so. Right on. So is there anything else you have to spell out about your character? What you think, where you would think you would take this?
I think preliminary goals I've pretty much covered.
Right on. Okay.
Things.
The last thing is the name, and I always have a hard time because I want my name to really reinforce the character. So I mean,
I always pick my name first.
Oh, do you really? I'm the opposite.
I didn't this time. It was sort of like jamming me up a little bit. I don't know. Just the name helps me form a picture of who the character is in my head.
So what'd you go with?
I told you I didn't pick one. It's really messing me up.
Oh man. So yeah, the name is the last thing that I come to. So I'll scan these and maybe they'll have names on them when they appear on the website with the episode. Yeah, I have a hard time with names. I want my, like when you see a movie and the main character's name, like really James Bond, like he couldn't be anything other than James Bond. You know what I'm saying? Simple. The name reinforces the character, and I want my characters to do that. So
I'm gonna be Jamie Bond.
Jamie Bond. No. All right. Well, Is there any other tidbits that you can think that you didn't really touch on with the character you made here about World of Darkness and vampire character creation that's worth mentioning?
There are a couple things we didn't actually mention on this. Probably one of the more important things on your character sheet is your blood pool.
Yeah, that's tied to your generation. So we didn't buy any generation because I think in a mortal game, I don't mind being. I like that struggle of being on the bottom. That's something else I should mention is when I make characters, especially in Vampire or any World of Darkness games, I like to play the underdog. I like to just get beaten down and crushed and try and come back from it to get my comeuppance, to give out my, the comeuppance, however you want to say that. So that's part of the reason why I like to lay out my characters the way I do. But I guess I've got a few things to touch on real quick on as far as clans that we didn't mention here. One, if you make a Ventru, they don't have to be stuffy businessmen. They don't have to be boring in that way. They can be, it doesn't have to be a Versace suit businessman that's wearing the $1,000 shoes. They could be anybody. It could be the slumlord real estate dealer, right? It could be anybody that can be a Ventru. I mentioned a few episodes ago when we were talking about characters somewhere else, when you make a Malkavian, don't make it about their derangement. It gets really boring after 1 or 2 games. Make sure you have a real character and not a derangement with dots. So make the character first and then make your derangement reinforce the character as opposed to the other way around, because you will find it to be terribly boring after a couple sessions when the newness wears off of it. Brujah don't just have to be mindless bricks of destruction. They can actually be organizers and smart people. And please, for God's sakes, don't make boring artsy-fartsy Toreador. There's way more to artists than just that.
Nuh-uh.
So there's a lot of tropes out there that go along with the clans, but I think it's fun to use them and play off of them, but not make something that comes right out of that mold.
Oh, angst. There's also angst.
Angst.
Artsy, fartsy, and angsty.
Angsty. Yeah. True story. Angsty days. So, alrighty. Well, I guess that'll do it for us today. So hopefully you made it through all of this, and hopefully if you are looking to start a vampire game or want to play in one, or that this will help you in some way, because it's like you see, we've laid these out, and granted, we've got a fair amount of experience, but it's not hard to do. You just fill in dots. If you fill out a Scantron sheet of any kind, you can do it. And you saw kind of organically, which is what we wanted to kind of show here, that our concepts kind of came together as we were putting dots on the paper. So you don't have to do some tremendous amount of work before you make a character. Like you can have some very loose ideas or no ideas at all in our case here and make what seems to be 2 pretty decent characters, I think. So right on. Well, other than that, thanks for hanging out and suffering through this one. Hopefully it wasn't too terrible for you, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can find us at justonemorefix.com and follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.